Thanks for coming to Science Sunday. Seems a little bit loud, Scott. Can you tone it down a hair? Maybe it's me. Tone me down a bit. You can hear me all right? Good. Yeah. I can stand back here. I could sit down. Thanks for coming, and this is third Sunday of the month, which is a regular Science Sunday, but as you may recall, we just this month only agreed not to have Science Sunday the first Sunday of this month because they were having their special beginning kickoff campaign of the money-raising campaign for the church. So they thought they'd like to have the whole church emphasizing that, and I can emphasize money if they need me to, but anyways, we decided that instead we'd do it the fifth Sunday of this month instead of the first. So 2 weeks from now, Scott's going to be leading a talk, which is about what, Scott?
E equals MC squared.
Oh yeah, the development of E equals MC squared. So make sure you're there for that. And should they have their calculators and their pads and everything?
Yeah, if you can attend an online course on relativistic physics.
Prior to, that would help, yeah. I think it's going to be acceptable to come with the knowledge base that you have, and Scott knows how to clear it up for you from that. And then we're going to have one again the week after that, so we'll have 2 Science Sundays in a row, the first in April, and I'll be leading that. So other than that, just wanted to make sure that was cleared up, so you know that we will have one in 2 weeks and in 3 weeks, and then in 5 weeks at the middle of April again as well too. All right. It's interesting. I know you talked about being interested in talking about Piaget, and I have an education degree that I finally chased down and got, and allowed me to teach school for about 7 years. And one of the main things that they did down the street in Bloomington Normal at Illinois State University was we were really introduced to Jean Piaget. And it's a very important part of the educational program down there. So I was very interested to hear about this. But Piaget was known for discussing childhood cognitive development. And so many times in the past history, the assessment by scientists of children was that they were basically just small adults, right? And so they were supposed to sit in churches for 7 hours or something like that and not swing their feet even and listen to the preacher talk. And they, the earlier images of what was in sperm cells, male sperm cells, was a tiny little homunculus, right? An actual person like hunkered down in there, ready to go chasing off after eggs and so on. So the whole assessment of children was just opened wide by this man, Jean Piaget, and changed the whole assessment of what is a child and what makes you be a child and how children develop. And it was pretty fascinating. They took us, and as student teachers, we were supposed to go out into the lab schools around the area of Bloomington Normal, and they'd give you a child for you to practice some of these Piagetian tests about. And I think that my child was actually pretty well salted by the fact that maybe he'd had 7 or 8 other student teachers, doing these same tests with him, because I didn't see the miraculous results that Piaget talked about in certain ways with some of these tests. Are you going to talk about those tests? Okay, so I won't jump on that story. But the assessment of how a child looks at the world is completely different than how an adult looks at the world. And I think that my child had been taking these tests for 10, 20, 30 years at the lab school, and was kind of salted by having this done before. But anyways, other than that, those are the things I wanted to make sure we covered before we started. Thanks so much for coming to Science Sunday today. It's always a pleasure to be here sharing some of these ideas and sharing thoughts about science together. We thank the church and its support of us in its ways, and thank Joanne for agreeing to come up and talk about Piaget for us. So thanks so much.
Aaron Gobra. To all my Irish cousins. Not many Irish cousins, as a matter of fact, but anyway. Am I? Joanne to Earth, Joanne to Earth. Are we available? Okay. Piaget and science. As was pointed out, few educational researchers study scientific and medical journals for knowledge or insight into either theory or the practice of education. Educators might ask if science informs educational research. We might ask if modern science provides insights into the formulation of new theories of education. I'm going to review some stuff about educational theories as exemplified by Jean Piaget and his theory of cognitive development, and how it could inform and direct science. We don't often think about education informing science. We think of it as being the other way around, and that ain't true. So I'm going to look at a few things. One, I'm going to review the selection of scientific studies. I'm going to examine the results of these studies. And finally, I'm going to consider how educational research and scientific investigations of the human brain should inform and direct each other. And I can do this to say exactly what I just said. Yeah, like that? I mean, so we get to say it twice. I'm going to address these 6 things. Does scientific study of the human brain inform educational research? Does scientific study lend credence to educational research? Does the scientific study of the human brain provide insight into educational research? And then turn it around. Does educational research inform scientific study of the brain? Again, does education lend credence to scientific studies? And does educational research provide insights into the scientific study of the human brain? We're going to look at this in terms of Piaget. We're going to look at this education side. And we're going to think about Jean Piaget. As was pointed out, he's a French fellow. He was involved in the French educational system, and the whole idea, again, of children being miniature adults didn't strike him as right. Again, he's an educator. He's dealing with children. And he said, there's something wrong here, and I need to look at it. Now, again, this was France, so the whole idea that you had to have backup studies, you had to have committees, and you had to have all this in order to perform the research was not necessary. You just did it. So, no, there were no research programs and no research directors. He just went out and had a good time. Come on, we can do this. Come on, darling. Hello. Come on, there. What he did was he went out with apparati, all sorts of different apparati, and he had the children make them work. It was sort of, here it is, do something with it. This was the one I chose to exemplify. It's not the only one. A simple 2-pan balance. So he came up with a balance. There were a couple of, hanging things, a couple of pans, and a whole bunch of weights. Now, he began looking at it in terms of the age groups and who could do what. And if we look at this, this is the group around 5 to 8, so the kindergarten and early childhood. When you gave it to them, they sort of looked at it and really didn't do anything. 4 to 7, they were just absolutely out of their league. They were told to balance it, and they would lift up one end or push down the other end, and it just didn't seem to make any sense to them. We moved on to what is called now Piagetian stage 2. Now this is 9 to 12-year-olds. So again, later on, what they were able to do was they took the 2-pan balance and they put the pans on the ends and put the weights in them. Now, if the researcher came along and moved one of them, they moved it right back. Nope, can't do that. And so again, we're seeing they've gone from the stage of I can't do anything with it at all, to I can do this, but don't mess with it. I'm not holding my tongue right. Ah, there. Back one. There. Now, at Piagetian stage 3, now we're talking essentially post-pubescent children. They were able to make it work. In the earliest stages, when this 12, 13, 14-year-old, they were able to adjust the two pans and adjust the weights so that it balanced. But they couldn't explain why. They just did it. It works. So it's only later on, after they're about 15, 16, that they were able to say, all right, yeah, it's the combination of distance and weight. And many could actually formulate the xy equals xy, and they were able to figure it out completely. So from this, he began saying, wait a minute, I'm seeing a steady series of changes. There we go. We're hypotheses. Now, please notice I did not call this a theory. Being a scientist, we understand the difference between hypotheses and theories. Children pass through specific developmental sequences, and the developmental sequence is irreversible, and the developmental sequence is the result of physiological changes to the human brain. Well, everyone just laughed. Of course not, we know better. No, the child just starts out and they're just short people and they just get tall and that's it. We don't see any real changes. Now, this of course is in the early 1950s and the mid 1950s. I did something exciting. I wonder what I did. Okay, so here we are in the 1950s. I'm sure some of us remember the 1950s. They were very different than today. They were unable to use the human brain in operation. We were unable to differentiate brain physiology from brain function. There, science. Went too fast. Welcome to the world of NMR. Now, when I started out as a chemist back in the mid-60s, we had nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. Ooh, a marvelous tool. Essentially, we would put stuff in a vial, and we put it into a magnet, and those atoms which had an odd nucleus, like hydrogen, would align with the magnetic field. We would then hit it with an RF signal, radio frequency signal, and we would monitor the radio frequency. As the radio frequency changed, we'd sit there and look, and all of a sudden, boom, and this would give off energy. And we would mark it down. They told us what the frequency was, but how big it was. These machines were large. Come on. There's a typical NMR lab. You can see in the upper right side that tall white cylinder. There. Now this is an NMR from Varian. The one that I worked on was rather different from this, but still, Varian is still the big producer of NMRs. This is quite a large device, as you can see. And here's a typical NMR spectrum. I've chosen a simple compound. This is ethyl alcohol. Notice on the left you see 4 blips. This is cleaned up, by the way. The 4 blips are the CH2. So if we look at this CH2 group right here, we can see that group is split by these 3 hydrogens and that hydrogen. And that's the 4 different peaks that we see. They're rotating around, this free motion, And so we're seeing the interaction of the hydrogens next to one another. And so that says to us, there is a relationship between structure and frequency, and we can take advantage of this. Secondly, we can look here. That's this one, right there. There's nobody around it. It's all by itself. And then this one over here. That's this group right here. We can see it's split by 2, and so we have the 3 peaks. We can use this diagnostically to say, this is the elements, this is how it's put together. We can see the ratios and say, this has got this much, and this one's only got this much. So if this were a long chain, we would see lots and lots and lots of those CH2s, and only a little bitty CH3 hanging out the end, and that kind of thing. So we use this diagnostically and quantitatively. Except, of course, it's big. And we had this thought, gee, if we could put a human in there, what could we see? But there's this vial. We had this itty-bitty vial. Stay. You're not cooperating with me. Mother is speaking to, well, okay, if that's the way you're going to be. Never argue with machines, kick them. So, what happens? We've all heard about MRIs, nuclear magnetic resonance imaging. There they are. Many of us have been inside of that big, stupid thing as it goes clonk, 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 noise, bang, ah! Yeah, we did it. But it took 40, 50 years for us to figure out how to do it. And depending upon how you look at the data, we can see 2 different things about the human. First off, this is just an MRI. So when they send this sports guy with a bad knee out to see an MRI, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at the physical structure and saying, what about the knees? What about the bones? What about the muscles? What about the tendons? Also, we can do functional MRI. Functional MRI actually looks at the flow of blood and water through the system, and it's a metabolic activity of anatomic structures. Exactly what we needed to study the brain. Cool. We got a thingy. We can test this Piaget guy, make sure he knows what he's talking about, huh? All right. Like that? Okay. 1999 to all of us here, we all remember 1999. Most of the time I look around and I see about half the group that goes, 1999. Wow, did you have calendars back then? We began looking at the structural maturation of individual brains and the regions of the connecting pathways. And the structural maturation is needed for the successful development of cognitive, motor, and sensory functions. So for the first time, we actually have some science that says, yeah, the brain is changing, and we're seeing cognitive changes, and we can correlate them with activities. Now, I wanted to stop back here. Let me go back one. There it is. Brain. Brains are sort of cool things. You get about 3 pounds of stuff on the top of your head. Coming from the spinal column, there's your cerebellum. That's back here. That's the so-called primitive brain. Now, below that, of course, is the campus and the hippocampus, which is the primitive brain. This is the thing that says, I'm alive. I exist. It doesn't say you. It simply says, yep, here I am. Then we have other groups around. The occipital lobe, as we know, the eyes actually are here. They cross and go upside down. And then it gets redistributed, and we'll talk about this redistribution. Temporal lobe, here. Parietal lobe, also called the medial lobe. That's this group right here. And then there's this stuff up front. Now, just as a matter of clarification, This is old brain. This old brain is working fast. This is the brain that is you. You are walking around, looking at things, driving, going home, making supper, turning on the television, doing all of your life's work, and it's all happening back here. Okay, so as we're talking along, what's 12 divided by 4? 12 divided by 4. Did you just feel it? You were going along, as we say, fat, dumb, and happy, and the brain was just processing and going, and suddenly you had to do 12 divided by 4. And the brain went, it froze up on you. And you actually shifted gears. You felt it shifting gears. You were connecting this one. This is a new part of the brain, and it's slow. It's really, really slow. It has to be trained. You have to work on it. It's not easy. That's what school is all about, or why we hate it. It's really hard to make this part work. But we have to do it, because this is the analytical brain. This is where we figure things out. This is where math and science really live. Yeah, we can do it here, but this is where we begin to think about things like that. Now, inside of the brain, if we look at the brain in the other direction, we see this. We see a mushroom. Now, out here, this is the outer part of the brain. This is the corpus callosum and all that kind of stuff. Now, right here, these little doohickers right here, left and right, this is the connections. Everything you do goes into these connection devices and channels back and forth through the brain and goes to its proper location. It's just like a computer bus. Exactly the same as a computer bus. It's where everything goes. This is the tube. This is the subway. This is how one part of the brain connects with the other parts of the brain. And so we are always interested in this as part of our study of the human brain. How quickly does the brain work? We have to talk about gray matter versus white matter. When you're born and when your brain just begins, it's gray matter. If we were to open it up and look at it, it would look gray. Later on, if you looked in our brains, you would see white. Gray matter is the original gray cells of the brain, and it's how the brain starts out. And these are the white matter. We're going to talk about this extensively. This is what turns your brain from a children's brain into an adult brain. Here's an fMRI. Not 100% clear, so I'm going to have some additional slides on this. But we can see, again, the changes that are going on. And we're going to do this. Now, what Paus did was he looked at the different parts of the brain and said, what's going on here? And we looked at the cerebellum, the back of the brain, we looked at the cross-section, and we can see what's happening over time. In every part of the brain, over time, we're seeing increases, speed changes. We're seeing a difference in the speed in which everything operates. So we're...
What are the scales on these graphs?
I'm sorry?
What are the scales?
The scale of that is years. This is how old the particular person was. So we're starting out at the age of 4 and going to the age of 20. So quite a broad study there. So Paus's conclusion was as follows. He observed the increases in white matter, and they corresponded to increased mental capacity in older children. And he observed increases in white matter, which were irreversible. So if we go back and look at this slide, we see again, here's the increases in white matter in all 4 parts of the brain, all going up. And we're saying, this appears to be related to white matter. Soule again, we look at Sowell. Sowell looked at the patterns of brain maturation between children and adolescents and the pattern of brain maturation between adolescents and adults. Now, the first thing he did was he confirmed Paus. He said, yep, everything that Paus said, dead on, is exactly what I found. White matter increases in the frontal areas in adults. Simultaneous gray matter decreases in the frontal areas, and increases in white matter in the frontal areas of adults is related to analytical and symbolic thinking skills. Why don't your teenagers have the brains of a small hammer? Well, they're in the process of changing. Why are adults expected to be able to think things through? Well, again, we're expecting it in terms of the brain. Now, the National Institute of Mental Health, which the present administration is rapidly destroying, took a look at all of these studies, and they put them together, and they said, let's take a look at the maturation and changes in the brain over time. Now, here we have a 5-year-old, and notice that the brain here versus the brain here, the blue parts is the change from gray matter to white matter. And we can see in the early childhood we're getting some changes here in the occipital region, because we're seeing better and better and better as time goes on. As we mature, we can see changes beginning in this parietal medial area, which increase dramatically as you're going through puberty. Post-puberty, adulthood. Wow, what is going on here? And they did this in terms of a movie. Here it is, and I hope this works. Oop, went too far. Going back, go back, going back. Okay, hit it. Watch what's happening here. Let's do it again. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Whoops, I didn't do it fast enough. You see how that worked? This is the maturation of the brain. This is what's physically happening. And you go, hokey smokes, what is going on here? Well, more studies. We've got to figure things out. So I'm going to charge on to the next guy. Gede in 2004, looks at the brain changes in terms of its mass. How big is the brain? And made some remarkable discoveries. First off, brain mass increases throughout childhood. Then, it's all primarily gray matter. Post-puberty, the brain loses mass, up to 5%. Ooh. Synaptic pruning, as it's called, and followed immediately by myelination. Myelin is a white protein which forms a sheath around the neurons and increases the transmission speed by a factor of 100. So we're turning a slow, old brain into a fast, new brain. But in order to do that, we have to get rid of 5% of it. Which 5%? To this day, we're not sure. All we know is, yep, we lose it. Now, this brings up obvious, interesting questions, which I will get to later on, but if we don't know what areas of the brain we're losing, this explains a lot, doesn't it? How many of you had teenage children? Had you noticed? There's this brilliant 12-year-old, knows what's going on, just the nicest kid in the whole world. Turns 13 and becomes obnoxious. You want to give them to someone, anyone, it doesn't matter. Please take it. And you say, please, go off to school, go off to military school, come back when you're 25, and we'll have a discussion. So this is one of the things that we didn't know about. Come on, baby. No, so if we look, and again, this was things from Gede, if we look at the total matter, we see the total matter dropping off, and we see the gray matter dropping off at a much higher rate. So the gray matter is underneath this white coating. The white coating of myelination is on the outside of the brain, and underneath is the gray. So it's speed here. We're also getting it in that bus, in the bus area of the brain, so we're getting higher transmission rates and higher transmission rates in the cortex. Functional studies. Bernia and Gorali, again, really cool. White matter maturation is related to development of cognitive functions. So we're looking and saying, as this brain gets to all this cool white matter, what's it doing? Well, the white matter maturation is related to development of sensory motor functions. Okay. We've seen this. A kid playing basketball looks awkward. And then you get to about 15 or 16 and suddenly they begin to become smooth. And by the time they're 20, they're going, Michael Jordan? No. Also, white matter maturation is related to the ability to retain and retrieve verbal and spatial information. Yeah, you've got an awful lot of information, especially here. I don't know if you know it, but you have a map. Literally, you have a map in your brain of where you live in and the places that you normally travel. You don't have to think about it. You just go. It's something that we older people who rely on maps, it's a part of us, and we do this quite well. You go west on 22nd Street, you take a right on Archibald Road, and go about 1.5 miles, and it's on your left. Do we need a phone for that? No. We automatically put this into our mind, we automatically put it into our map, and we've got it, and we're off and running. Also, we begin to think about the verbal tasks that are involved. We also, and this is something which I did not put up here, we talk about mirror neurons. The whole thing of, well, I don't know what you're feeling. That's wrong. I do know what you're feeling. One of the things about a mirror neuron is I look at you and I say to myself, if I had that expression on my face, what would I be thinking? What would I be feeling? And since we're all humans, welcome to the club, we all have our belly button, right? We all can do the same thing. Some of us do it better, some of us not as well. A little bit of training, we all can do it really well. And we call it body language and things like that. We can really tell each other's mental state. And we can differentiate about 21, 22 different mental states and conditions just by looking at the other person's face. Now, of course, there are those folks who don't recognize a face. They got problems. So again, we look at this and we say, yeah, all right, so what does this do? I mean, what do we do with this information? Well, Rubia looked at it and said, all right, we're going to test motor responses, inhibition, cognitive interference, inhibitions, and attention set shifting. Okay, what's all that mean? When we specify a test, we give you a time limit. We give you something that you have to do, and we time you. If we look at an adolescent, that adolescent will hit you with an answer within microseconds. It's probably wrong. Adults will take longer. Not that much longer, but longer. We can measure it. And it's generally much closer to being right. And again, that comes up to this part of the brain, especially, where we can begin to analyze, we begin to look at different changes, we begin to look at different things and saying, well, if that's true, then okay. So we're beginning to mature. That's why we send 19-year-olds off to war. 30-year-olds, no. Whoop, went too fast. Back one. So in conclusion, we say the transition from childhood to mid-adulthood, there is a regressive task-specific maturation in the frontal lobes, controlling cognitive control functions. I think I said that smarter than Deming. That's science talk. Yeah, we get to figure things out much better over time. So, scientific conclusions. Childhood. Again, straightforward from what we've seen so far. Age-related processes are responsible for the maturation of the human brain. Okay, got it. Childhood brain, gray matter, grows in size, reaching a maximum at approximately 12. And then puberty hits. Oh, it's a horrible time. I'm sure most of us had tried to wipe it out from our memory. It wasn't an easy period for any of us, right? And part of it was the fact that, A, your brain has just thrown away 5% of itself. We don't know what part, what memories were there, whatever. You're putting in a totally new brain, and sex. They should be spaced out, you know? And white matter gradually replaces gray in a specified sequence, moving from the base of the brain to the midbrain. Adolescence. We talk about puberty, complex structural changes, gray matter, volume decreases, synaptic pruning, gray matter changes, myelination, transmission rates up 100-fold. The process continues into early adulthood and perhaps beyond. The measurements really stopped somewhere around the age of 19 or 20. We really didn't carry out a systematic study of adults. And many non-systematic studies have occurred, and it says, yeah, if you work at it, you will continue this process of developing a better, smarter, more intelligent, more capable brain. Most people don't. Most people get out of high school and stop. You ask most people, have you read a book in the past year? And the answer is no. Then there's silly people like us who go, yeah, I just finished. And so, yeah, we're dealing in very different types of people. I point out all the scientific types here, that we just keep feeding on this necessity of learning more and more and more. So let's go back and say, what did Piaget say? I mean, we're talking now 1955, 56, 57. His hypotheses, every single one of them have been confirmed. They laughed at him. And they went, Piaget, what does he know? Well, he knows everything, evidently. Yeah. Children pass through developmental sequence? Yep. Developmental sequence is irreversible? Yep. Developmental sequence is a result of physiological changes? Yep. No doubt about it. We can measure it, we can see it, we can demonstrate it. If we look at an overlap between Piaget's 3 stages and the brain maturation processes that we know what's occurring, we can see Piaget stage 1, Piaget stage 2, and Piaget stage 3. Yes, he hit it right on the nose. He saw it completely. Now, he couldn't explain it in terms of brain functions. He couldn't explain it in terms of the physiology of the brain or the maturation or myelination. But he saw it happening and said, there's something here. Let's think about the brain growth and what is appropriate in terms of pedagogy. So now I get to put on my educator's hat. At an early age, let's take a look at these different ages of children. And we'll look at these 6 different periods in human development. In infancy and preschool, so we're talking itty-bitties. So kids begin to figure things out roughly age 2. So we're talking something between ages 2 and maybe 6. What are we seeing? We're seeing cerebellum growth, language, manual dexterity, music, objects, and toys. Yeah, they go from blah, 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 blah. Mama, mama, kitty, like kitty, right? And then suddenly they start talking and they won't shut up. Oh, manual dexterity. How many of us have pictures of our children with spaghetti? Manual dexterity, food, hand, face, and it gets everywhere. And of course, it's wonderful to bring this out with their girlfriends or their boyfriends and go, and just to embarrass the hell out of them, right? Music, yeah. Have you ever seen, pictures of little kids and the music is playing and they're, yeah, this should be encouraged. The whole idea of music and dance, yes, because this is part of that maturation process and we want that part of the brain to be more nourished. Objects and toys, oh yeah, they figure out what toys are and then we end up with toy boxes, which are not in the toy box. The toys are everywhere. And we go, did you clean up your toys? Oh yeah. And now mom goes and cleans up all the toys. Early childhood. Now we're getting into the occipital and medial changes. This is occurring in here. And we talk about seeing and hearing. Does a 3-year-old really see or hear? Yeah. Does an 8-year-old, 6-year-old see and hear? Very differently. They're very aware of instructions. They're very aware of television. They can see what's on television. Reading and writing. The manual skills of writing, the manual skills of reading, these are becoming important. You have to arrive at a specific stage in development of this thing in order to do that. And observation and categorizing. There's all these 4-legged critters. And at this point you're going, cow, horse, dog. Oops, sure, that's a 2-legged. That's got to be a person. And so we're beginning to figure out, we're beginning to see these nuanced changes and differentiations between different similar things. Prepubescence? Yeah, they're very much wrapped up in themselves, as we've noticed. Time and place. This is where this medial area begins to develop in terms of your map of the world, your ability to say, it's about noon, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, time to wake up, time to go to bed. All those other things are occurring there. Geography and science. Where am I in this world? You can finally look at a globe and look at a map and begin to go, there's a correlation between what I know and this schematic picture, and begin to put all of that together. Interpersonal relationships. This is the time to put the damn phone down. Children should be playing with other children. They should be talking physically, one-on-one, not only with other children their age, but children both younger and older. And pets. Pets get in on this. This is where you can really form that other super bond between human and animal. Interpersonal, environmental relationships. Yeah, the difference between a swamp and a pond and a lake and a swimming pool, how does it all fit together? We can begin to talk about environment, our planet, climate, and that kind of thing, and they're going to understand it. Adolescence. It's all going to be in the temporal. They're really beginning to feel this temporal lobe now. It's really beginning to come into play. Math. Now we say that math is a terrible thing. Science is awful. Logic, oh my God. Yes, we have to train this. This does not come automatically. We have to force it. And the more you force it, the better it works. But it's very, very difficult to make this part of your brain work for you. The more you make it work, the easier it is. But trying to get there, really, really hard. Now, much of it has this problem right here. This is a major distractor, isn't it? This sex thing. Yeah. How can I be worried about mathematics and science if oh, look at that. Oh my. Oh. And suddenly all of the hormones kick in, and it's, yes. Uh-huh. Very, very, very difficult time. We understand that. And of course, your child will say, you were never young. And you go, where the hell do you think you came from? Oh. Young adults, we're heavy into problem solving. We've got enough background now in terms of math, science, geography, history, location, that we can begin doing some problem solving. We can begin doing some really heavy-duty ideas about thinking critically. Get that process down. Decision-making, executive functions. Why should I be doing this? One of the things I emphasize to many of my students is road rage. This is where this executive function comes in. The son of a bitch cut you off, and you're going to get him. If your executive functions are working, you're going to go, no, it's not worth it. Let the jerk go. This is not a fight. We're on a highway. We're doing 70 miles an hour. We got 2-ton vehicles. The only thing that can happen is one of us is going to get killed. Let him go. One of those basic executive functions. In adults, okay, we've got our world together. We're functioning. We're 25, 30 years old. Learning how to learn. It's actually a process. It's actually a thing which you have to learn to do. It isn't a case of, well, I'll get to that book later. You have to have a conscious thought about, what am I going to learn? What am I interested in? What can I see? Self-directed learning, lifelong learning. These are the processes that adults go through, hopefully, and hopefully begin to make better and better and better decisions. So if we look at the combination of research in science and education, we see that education informs science. Yeah, we're the ones that told the scientists that we have brains and they change and the children are different from adults. The scientists of the day kept saying, yeah, they're just small adults. We asked, what areas of the brain are involved in processes? And do the areas of the brain that are involved in these processes change as the child ages? We're the ones that said, yes, they do. So we're the ones that informed science and said, yeah, you got to look at this. This, by the way, this one down here, we still don't know. We still don't know what happens to that thought, that memory, that process. When the synaptic pruning occurs, it appears to be somewhat random. We don't know the rules of it. So can you lose a memory? Evidently, at least part of it. Now, you can't lose an entire memory because it's located in many places throughout the brain, but can you lose specific information? Yeah. Science informs education. Sure does. Once again, puberty has a controlling effect on the development of the adult brain. Yeah. I think that's fairly obvious. All of a sudden, a child becomes a proto-adult, becomes an adult, and all of a sudden, our roles with our children change dramatically. What occurs in the brain? Are there areas that are more susceptible to pruning? Are areas of greatest synaptic pruning also the areas of greatest myelination? We think that answer is yes. Again, we ask that question. What areas of the brain that have previously been used solving a problem suffer synaptic pruning? What areas inform brain problem-solving functions? Sacrifice, what areas are sacrificed? And how are the skills reacquired? If you lose a specific skill, a specific memory, and a specific way of doing things, how do you reacquire it? It should be relatively easy because you have a faster brain. At the same time, you don't know what you lost.
Well, when people have a stroke, they
Yeah.
definitely know what they lost, but if
Indeed,
Can
an
you
excellent
repeat the
example.
question?
The problem of a stroke, yeah, and we can see that mechanically. I can do this, and I don't even think about it. After a stroke, I may have to think about every single action and activity to do this. And so, what part of the brains are affected? We use this. This is a study that is constantly being done. We look at stroke victims and say, what area of the brain was affected? What is changed about you? And how will you reacquire those specific skills? Sometimes they're mechanical. Sometimes they're mental processes, things that you used to know. Yeah. Mike?
I just asked you to repeat the questions for the people in the back. I asked you to repeat the question is all that I said, but beyond stroke, I'm also thinking of lack of, loss of swallowing capacity. That seems to be a big problem with older people nowadays too, and they have speech
Well, yeah.
therapists in hospitals that now are teaching people how to learn how to swallow again. And it's actually a determining factor whether people can survive after a stroke or after age-related issues.
Yeah, in general, I think we sort of ignore the fact that this thing here, this is me. All of this is the carrying case that maintains this. This is me. And when something happens here, it's me that's been affected. And what part of me no longer functions well? Do I recognize the fact that I've lost that function? In the cases of dementia, you may not even realize that you have a problem. You lose track of yourself, you lose track of others, and we all hope that that doesn't occur, but it does, and we know it. Stroke, again, physical versus mental. We're just at the very edge of beginning to figure out what this incredible machine is and how it works. And much of it has been a case of we couldn't see it. But now with MRI, fMRI, EEG, we're beginning to really make inroads as to how this thing works. And as we look into the future, we can see that we should be going away from this monster to something closer to this. Now this is an EEG, which again is a relatively simpler form, but can we in fact have something like that in the future with miniaturization and the different things? Come on, you can do it. There. Could we in fact, if we had a small unit, could we simulate Piaget's experiments just by putting a cap on a child and let them do this in VR? Wouldn't that be an interesting series of experiments? And inexpensive. We could really do a whole bunch of stuff. And, once again, stroke victims, dementia problems, learning problems. What can we learn that we don't know everything? We're just making baby steps into the study of the brain. And if we could do it, what's going on here? Again, could we correlate the actions of a child and manipulate the apparatus in responses to the researchers' questions? Yeah. And this makes it easy for all of us if we can do it. So as you got to do with all talks like this, you have to have a call for action, right? Essentially, we keep building silos. There's the physics silo, there's the math silo, there's the chemistry silo, there's the education silo, and we're all very jealous. No, you can't come in. And yet, these studies that we're looking at right now, it's a matter of cooperation. We put the physics, the chemistry, the education, the medicine, all together to begin to solve a basic problem. What's this? It's me. How does it work? I don't know. What happens in the future? I don't know. Well, we should know. And so, let's, again, as so many of us have done, tear down Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that, no. Let's tear down those silos that separate us. And no more looking down the nose at educators. Those that can do, those that can't teach. Let me suggest something. Now again, I'm from Boston. Please remember that. How can I help? Sue,
Wonderful. Hold on, let's
Wait,
make sure
wait.
we have the
microphone coming.
microphone coming.
Microphone coming through.
Car insurance for teenagers. Girls are fine, boys have to pay a premium till they're 25. Is that part of this brain and how fast they develop?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch it.
For car insurance,
Oh,
the girls are okay, but the boys get a hefty, or the parents of boys get the hefty increase in insurance because their brain doesn't develop till they're 25, supposedly.
yeah, what happens is, again, we develop these mechanical skills. 14-year-old boys are really, really athletic, aren't they? And they're full of pep and vinegar, and they really know what they're doing, but they don't have the brains of a small chicken. They don't have what we call common sense, which doesn't really exist. But again, they don't make executive decisions. So they've got all this horsepower going here, but they don't have the guardian that says, well, let's think about that. Let's measure twice, cut once. That process doesn't exist. It's strictly emotions, and what happens? Do teenage boys get into trouble with cars? All the time. Do teenage boys do stupid things? My brothers decided that they could jump off the roof of our house. We had a 2.5-story house. There was a tree next to it. They would climb to the top of the building and leap to grab the tree. Only one brother broke his arm. And I would sit there, and I'm the eldest, and you go, huh, what are you doing? Well, it's fun. Another brother turned the family car over on its back. Third brother got angry with, the second brother got angry with the third brother, and so took the third brother's guitar and locked it in the trunk of his car. And you go, Leonard, what are you doing? I'm just angry with him. Now, come on. Do adults do that? Unfortunately, yes, but they're generally the ones that are incarcerated.
I was knowing you're seeing things nowadays, people talking about the changes in education where kids aren't learning cursive anymore. Kids are doing whole different activities because we don't need to have large spelling classes and things like that because we have spell check on our computers. But those things not only are just adapting the way that you teach and the way that people learn, but it's also a different attitude or different things are going on, which is not treating the brain in the same way. So some of our choices may be a short-term solution. Why learn to spell, or why learn to do calligraphy or write, cursive and so on, but it has an impact on how you learn as well.
Exactly, and just because we have the technology to do things doesn't mean that we as physiological animals have adapted to that marvelous technology. In many cases, we haven't. The computers, and we're talking about AI now, right? And that has become the scourge of everything. As a writer, of course, we think about AI writing complete books. And we go, wait a minute, I'm an author. I work very, very, very hard to come up with an idea, to put it on paper, to massage it, to edit it, to get everything right, and I try to bring it out there to other people so that they can enjoy what my brain just put together. And other people go, and a full-fledged novel comes out from a computer. Is one better than the other? Oh, what are we talking about in terms of better? Did I work really hard to write my novels? Oh, you darn tootin'. And then I discovered in the 10th book that I had to go back to the first book and rewrite it. Yes, that's how some of these things work. It's the scourge and now we're also looking at what is AI doing to us as a society? Do we have computers controlling the news, the feeds on our telephones, our computer feeds? Yes. Some of them are easily detected, some of them aren't. Are we advancing rapidly enough to be able to control this? No. Essentially, this thing has been around for 200,000 years, basically unchanged. It's changed a little bit, yeah, we're changing, but we're changing at the speed of biology, not at the speed of, I can think of a whole new way of doing things, and putting it down in zeros and ones, and have a machine suddenly do things at speeds which are beyond me to consider. I don't know.
Referring to earlier in your talk about, you were showing those charts of the brain mass and the percentages of gray and white matter. Are there tests to come up with like mass numbers, or is that like just dependent upon occasional autopsies?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, is there some way?
I have not a hearing problem, I have a recognition problem. I'm
okay.
sure many of you also do. The ears work perfectly, the brain is going, huh? Go ahead again.
Well, is there a way to test for the brain mass and the percentages of white matter and gray matter in, say, a whole group of test subjects? Or is that something that was built up over occasional brain surgeries or autopsies?
Yes, there is, but I don't think there's the money available for it. We talk about an MRI machine. Massive, expensive, horrible. And for all of us who've been through MRI, we know that it's a lengthy procedure and it takes some time. Now, let's think about trying to do 1,200, 2,000, 5,000 children and start at the age of 4 and bring them through the age of 25. Could we? Yes, if we wanted to devote our resources to that, we could do that. I just don't see the willingness to do it or the money, especially in today's circumstances where we're wiping out. Look who's in charge of the Department of Health. Yeah. We can't vaccinate because of autism that doesn't occur. We can't vaccinate chickens for pests because it might affect the food. I'm sorry, but dead chickens who had died from disease, how are we going to cull? I'm just going to cull 100. We culled 166 million chickens. I wonder what inoculations might have done. But again, that's just me.
Yes, well, hello. Your story with the guitar reminds me of something we didn't cover too much, I think, with this talk. Can you hear me? I think you can hear me. Hello?
Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, I know Piaget. Yeah, we learned about Piaget in psychology class, and I know Piaget is kind of a hero of the humanist movements, and Piaget was one of the first, other than religious folks or priests and so forth, or philosophers, who talked about the origins of how do we know what people decide is moral, whether there's moral development. And I think we went from Piaget to like Kohlberg and Kagan, and maybe now to just some other contemporaries. Let's see. We talk mostly about the brain and brain development, and sort of more things about how to move objects and how to solve puzzles and things. Any thoughts about or any studies about Piaget and the work with them and work with newer folks pertaining to moral development and like that?
Once again, my hearing problems are in the way.
Oh, dear. I know,
I
like
hope-
Piaget, that there was like there's a whole thing about moral development and like four stages of moral development, and then I think Kohlberg moved that into like 8 stages, and I think Jonathan Haidt built on those.
Too
those
many echoes.
materials.
I'm having problems.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Hello? Okay, so yeah, Piaget is just a huge hero of humanist developments pertaining to, he was one of the first, other than priests or philosophers or Aristotle or somebody, who talked about like moral development of people. And like growing from like small children up through adolescence, and any cool stuff about that with brains and so forth?
This has got to be the last question.
The question becomes one of how do we get morals, and where do morals come in the intellectual development and the brain processes? I'm going to suggest that most morals are coming from our emotional stability. That is, do we have sympathy, empathy, and altruism? If you are sympathetic and empathetic, you are probably also altruistic. And I see morals as coming from this basic root. And this comes really from childhood and from mom and everything else. I see this as being essentially a part of humans which we can drive out, we can suppress, but most children, and if you take, again, a situation in which 2 children are sitting there, one has a plate with 4 cookies in it, and one has a plate with none. What will happen? The child with the 4 cookies will actually take them and put them into the other child's dish. Can this be suppressed? Oh, sure. Do we have children in neighborhoods who are the best friends with a person of a different color, a person of a different religion? Yes, absolutely. We have this all the time. And of course, the kids don't know it. My 6th birthday party, Mom invited a bunch of people over, a bunch of my schoolmates, and Sarah's mom was late, so Mom made sandwiches for us, BLTs, and Sarah was Jewish. And when Sarah's mom showed up, my mother was just all apologetic, just, don't worry about it. I mean, yeah. But again, she was aware of a problem. The other person was aware that she was aware. And could there have been a situation, how dare you and all this? Yeah, there could have. And instead, these people were empathetic, sympathetic, and Sarah's mom was really happy that her daughter got fed. So I perceive, this is me, that morals is built in. That is, are you sympathetic towards other people's plight? Do you put yourself in that other person's position? Do you try to do something about it if there's a problem? And I see that as normal human. So I don't, and again, this is why I don't need a religion. It's built in. And people that don't do this, I have a problem. I don't understand them, which, again, it's my problem. But why don't you? You know what I mean? I see that I have run over my time by about 15 minutes, maybe more.
Thank you so much. Very nicely done. Appreciate it.